I'm Moser, and this is the MonoLoco workshop. Today I'm going to show you how to make a mallet. I've recently gone into the hybrid woodworking model where you use power tools and hand tools on a project. You generally use power tools in the beginning and hand tools at the end to kind of finesse into the final product that you want. From my experience, you end up with a little bit better quality, or sometimes a lot better quality product in the end, and for me it's a lot more satisfactory. So because of this, I've gotten myself some higher quality chisels. Now these chisels have a wooden handle, and you do not want to be hitting your wooden handled chisel with a metal hammer. You're just going to damage it and you're going to be throwing them away because you're going to have broken chisels. So because of this, you need a wooden mallet. Now, wooden mallets don't have to just be used on chisels. You can use them for hitting wood or a number of things. So, I mean, it's not going to mar the wood. You're going to use them for a lot more things than you think you will. So I made this mallet. This is a regular joiner's mallet that is out of the ShopNotes issue 2. I actually just went to Google and searched up ShopNotes joiner's mallet. Here you go, PDF. So I started out with the two pieces of wood that I had. I had some maple sitting around and I had some walnut sitting around, and it's been sitting there for months. So I cut it all up with the bandsaw and cut it into the individual pieces for both the head and the handles. I then put them on the joiner to get everything flat to where I can glue it together. I later ran them through the planer. I ran as many as I could through at one time, and it still took a good while. I could not run the handles through the joiner. I couldn't get it down far enough, so I ended up just running these through the joiner, and they turned out fine. They glued up just fine. I cut my angles here at 2 degrees for the head. And really the only way I could think of on how to do this was to use a speed square to set it, and then I got my angle gauge or whatever that thing is, and I locked down my angle, and I used that same angle for the rest of the project. So I set that angle on the interior of my mallet heads, and then I took it and I drilled some holes in the maple on the inside to be able to fill them with lead later. And then I took them on the table saw and I cut that 2-degree line on the inside of the mallet heads. And then I just cut everything to size using my miter sled or my table saw sled. I gave everything just a brief sanding and then glued everything together. In some mallets I used lead BBs or sinkers, and I ran out of those, so then I just used some BBs. And I can't really feel a difference. I'm sure if I weighed them there would be a difference, but I've had a couple people test them out and they couldn't really tell. After everything was glued up, I ran everything through the joiner again to kind of true up or flatten out one side, and then ran it through the table saw. Then later I cut probably about a 5 to 10 degree slant alongside the heads here, and then ran that over the sander again, giving it that nice curve. I went to the leather store and picked up just some rawhide, and I cut it down to size, just roughly, a little oversized, and then I used some contact cement. You know, that stuff that you'll use on Formica on a countertop? That stuff was just a couple bucks. I did try using the spray adhesive, did not work the same. It still worked, but just not the same. The contact cement really worked nice. And then you let it sit for 15 minutes after you put the contact cement on. After 15 minutes, you stick both sides together and that stuff is stuck. I did end up taking it and putting it in a clamp and letting it sit overnight, but I really don't think I needed to. It was late. I wasn't going to keep working. So I got everything set up in the clamp, let it sit overnight, and then in the morning I got up and I just used a utility knife and I cut the leather off down to size so it was right around the mallet, and then I took it to the sander and put just a little bevel around on the leather. The plans actually had you put a little bevel on the wood. I did that on my very first one, my test mallet. I didn't like it. So I later just left those flat. I figured I'd get a better glue up, and then I would put and then I just put the bevel on the leather. So after the heads were completely done and everything was sanded up, I trued up I straightened up all the handles and then cut them down to size. And then I used the simple jig for cutting tendons. So I more or less cut a little bit off around every piece of the handle, so then it would fit into the head. I then I lowered the table saw blade just a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch or maybe 1/4 of an inch, so it wasn't all the way to the base of the head. And I cut 2 slots in the middle of it, and that is where I plan on putting my wedges. I cut all of the wedges at 2 degrees, and I left the thinnest part to be the same size as the curve of my blade, or at least I tried. And so I cut those the angles with the table saw, and then I cut them out with my bandsaw and cut them down to size. After I had the wedge slots cut into the handle, I stuck the whole thing in a clamp. Let me get one of them. Just a second. So I used like this clamp right here, and I clamped this down to the table, and then I clamped this to that. And it actually worked out really well, because then the whole handle was up in the air and it was away from everything. So I used a spoke shave to try to kind of give all of the handles some contour and make them really feel good in the hand. I also used a scraper to smooth that up, and it did a fantastic job. I was actually surprised how good of a job it did. I then used a chisel to try to straighten up all of my edges so they'd be nice and clean, and at that point the handles were pretty much done. So I applied some glue to the inside of the head, I applied some glue to the inside of the mallet wedge slots, and stuck it together, glued it up. After it dried, I cut it flat, and I used a hand plane, and then again I used a scraper on the top of the mallet head to really smooth that out. So you can almost, like, you can't even really feel that there's something there, even though, I mean, there's like 6 or 7 or 10 different kinds of wood right there. Can't really feel them all come together. It feels great. I also ended up using a little bit of glue because there were some teeny tiny gaps in there. I filled some glue in there and then just sanded it down. What gaps? I don't see any gaps. So after everything was sanded, I put on my logo. And to do this, I just printed out some images in reverse on a laser printer, stuck them on, used some lacquer thinner, wiped it off. That method's been tried and true and around the internet. And then I just applied some Danish oil for the finish, and they look fantastic. So now it's time to make sure all of my brand new chisels are finely honed and sharpened and ready to go. So I took them to the grinding stone, I gave them a little hollow grind, and then I finished everything up with the stones. I usually do the stones in the end. I go up to 8,000 grit and everything's nice and shiny, and I can see my pretty face. So after everything's done, I was able to cut a dovetail using my new dovetail saw that my wife got me, using my nicely sharpened chisels and using my awesome mallets. And everything worked great, and I ended up with some fantastic dovetails. I mean, it was satisfying. Thanks for watching. If you've liked this video, please comment below and let me know what you think. You can also follow me on Twitter, you can find me on Google+, and you can find me on Facebook. I know that there's a lot of these other mallets out there. I mean, these ShopNotes plans have been available for quite some time. So there's blog posts, articles, videos about these. This is just kind of my way of doing it. So let me know what you think.